1.
You're listening to the 50,000 watt clear channel voice of news radio.
3, 2.
Hello, I'm Deborah Carter, host for Gaining a Voice. We all have a natural curiosity about our environment, our place in the world, and how we affect one another. And for these reasons, we like to hear stories. We're affected by stories when we can relate to them personally, emotionally, socially, and culturally. What we call news is the way the media presents our stories. In this program, you'll see how the media interprets these stories and shapes them into news.
Does it affect a lot of people? Is it extremely unusual? Does it hit people where it counts? And sometimes that means the pocketbook, but sometimes it means like the emotions. Does it speak to people's values? Does it challenge those values? You know, those are the kinds of questions we ask quite a bit when we're trying to decide whether something will be a news story or not.
Any story is, the media needs the story to survive. If you're talking about news or if you're talking about any kind of journalism, there has to be a story or it doesn't exist. I think what is incumbent upon organizations such as ours or Sports Figures or anybody else is the ability to create a story that is of interest, that is timely, and that meets the needs of the media and the public. It's a very complicated thing we do, and our job, when it comes right down to it, is to beg people to give us help. I mean, that's about as basic as you can get. So if you're looking at how you're asking people for assistance, that's the real challenge. And you've got to keep it pretty basic, because any charity you come across, if we're talking about charities in this case, any charity you come across, the more time and effort it takes to tell people what you do, the more likely your message isn't going to get through and you're going to lose them.
Everyone has a definition of what constitutes a news story. It's a totally subjective process. What constitutes a news story is traditionally, it said, it would answer the 5 W's, the who, where, when, and how of a place. Human interesting events make a news story. Natural disasters are stories, you know, a flood, an earthquake, massive snowstorm. Then the traditional stories are political stories. What is the functioning of democracy, its institutions, its leaders, its politicians. What is also news is how citizens interact with each other, the ebb and flow of a community, that how kids go and play hockey at the local arena and so on. Then what makes stories are sports events are big stories. I mean, whatever human beings do is a story.
We have to rely on the curiosity of the people who work here. We're really in the curiosity business. In this show, we have 10 producers, and we are as good as they are. And we want to make sure we cover different kinds of stories by hiring people who know how to find different kinds of stories, hiring people who will go out and read other publications or watch other TV shows, read magazines, go to other community events, so that we don't have everybody who knows everything about City Hall or everything about the provincial government, but nothing about what's going on in a community center up the road or in some part of northern Canada.
It's sort of sometimes hard to define what is news, and it's often surprising for me to say to a group, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know you ran a program like that. I'd love to do a story on it. And they'll say, I didn't think anybody would be interested. I didn't think that qualified for news. What I would say to people is pay attention to the television show. Watch the news from 6 to 7. Take a look at some of the stories that we do. Take a look at the human interest stories that people share with us. Anything that matters to people, essentially, is news.
The issue of spousal abuse has been with us for a long time. Groups have tried to gain media attention about this issue. In early 1996, an individual gave a face to this issue, which attracted a great deal of media attention.
I think this is maybe really a drop in the bucket, but I think it's another group of voices saying the laws have got to change. We've got to give more protection to women. We've got to properly treat offenders who are so violent, perhaps keep them incarcerated until they're no longer a threat.
The only way to stop it is for everyone to speak collectively, simply because one voice is lost in the wind. But when everyone gets together, it's a roar. It's time that we were heard. Changes have to be made to close the loopholes in the legal system.
I've interviewed so many women who are in hiding in the past year since I've been a columnist. It's been unbelievable. I mean, I've been in donut shops meeting women in disguise because they've been stalked and brutally beaten by their husbands. I've interviewed women whose addresses are unknown, completely hidden, and I'm really amazed at the courage of this woman and why she's been able to speak publicly. I'm also here because this community seems to want to be able to do something instead of just sort of shrugging and saying, well, we did the best we could under existing laws. The people here seem to want to try and do something to change the laws, and I'm just really interested in that process. I'm interested to see if they can do anything.
People are getting very, very tired of the women being killed off and injured and maimed, and they're willing to take a stand now. Someone had to speak, and if it had to be me, so be it. And it was like reading your own obituary, death notice, whatever you want to call it. When it just sent chills up and down my spine.
Well, without a victim, I guess it wouldn't really be an issue. I mean, a victim is what makes it a story. It's the fact that there is a Heather Imming. That's what makes it so compelling, is that she's come forth to tell her story. I mean, in this business, I guess you do a lot of issues that don't have faces to them. The stories aren't as good because you don't have the person who's actually involved. That's what makes this story so unique, is she's actually been brave enough to come here and tell her own story tonight.
Mainly what I'm interested in is something that would be of interest to the public at large. You know, I mean, there are some things that are hopelessly narrow and, you know, maybe of interest only to, you know, a very tiny group of people. And if that's the case, you know, I'm just not interested. But, you know, having a lot of contact with the public and talking to people all the time, I have a pretty good sense of, you know, what people would be interested in reading in.
In terms of the pacing, it's awkward because you've got fear, paranoia, disbelief, denial. Okay, so that grabs me as a reader. I'm sitting there thinking, wow, gotta read this stuff. And then it's followed up with something that is almost bureaucratic in its tone. It could be something that maybe I've heard it that day on the radio or from a friend or a neighbor, and I think that's interesting. So I'll raise it with a reporter in the newsroom or with another editor, and if they think that's interesting too, then we might start sniffing. It could be a reporter coming to me and saying, I've got a really neat story from somebody who is a contact in my beat area. I'd like to go after that story. So we'll talk that through and see if that seems to have merit, and then they'll go after it. So the idea for the news story can come from the reporter, it can come from the editor, it can come from someone who just happens to call into the paper.
You have to know that the ideal for a television newsroom is when the newspapers in the morning reflect all of the headlines from the 6 o'clock news last night. Nothing drives me more nuts than to be doing a story tonight at 6 that was in the paper this morning. So it feels good when you find that. And 2 of the 3 stories on the front page we did last night at 6. That's cool.
Yes. Anna Karina, Calgary Exchange. This is the exchange students from Calgary visiting with the Gatineau students.
Oh, it's student exchange, so we don't end up with Calgary.
Okay. Now the pictures will be their arrival a week ago, and then their tour of Museum of Civilization this afternoon. Follow them along on the tour, talk to them, have things really changed, have their views or their attitudes changed because of this exchange.
Do they speak French?
I don't know. I don't know. Whether French is a part of their curriculum in Calgary, I don't know their details, their specific details.
Call to Anna Karina, are you on the air?
Well, I came in this morning and I had a previous story to work on, and then I was to go back to the newsroom, and then I got the press release that gave the location and the time and a bit of background on this event.
Libéré parce qu'il a été commandé spécialement à la commission scolaire. C'est Monsieur Lionel.
Well, it's just that people normally, when they bring cameras like this, they just need to fill out a form.
Okay,
and
well,
information
the guy upstairs in the information said everything was okay.
Okay.
So it's been
If he
clear.
says it's okay, it's okay.
What do you want to
So
do
we can do it right here. I just want to get this in back.
You're from Calgary or you're from here?
From Calgary.
Okay, who's your host?
She is.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Come on down here.
Can we take a picture?
Okay.
Tara, I'm going to speak with you first, okay, since you're the visitor.
You want them together? Like a two-shot or?
Whatever's easier.
Yeah, let's do a two-shot.
Two-shot?
Okay.
Okay. Tara, you're staying here with your friend's family, right?
Yeah.
What is it that you're learning on a daily basis about them?
Just the language difference and how they speak both languages instead of just English, like in Calgary.
First, I think about what kind of visuals I have, because we are dealing with television. You can't tell it without pictures. So I think how I can tell it visually first. And then I think about, there are lots of children involved in this, maybe how the whole event would affect them. So I'd like to get their perspective and fit that into the story. That's going to be the key to the story. Will I be able to chop it up and take it in different parts?
Interviews?
Yeah, because I'm gonna scatter the interviews throughout the piece, and then I'm gonna need some visuals in between.
Yeah.
So I've got the two girls looking over there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What else? In a story like this, I pretty much know what it's going to look like. Visually, it's not going to be too grabbing because it's students touring a museum. But in other cases, if it's I guess more event-oriented, you can focus your story around that. For instance, if it's like a fire, that's the story. Those are your visuals. So for something like this, you really have to grope for visuals.
It's not an easy thing to sort of answer why we choose one story over another. News judgment is quite subjective. There might be a story that I think is a great story that somebody sitting next to me would say, no, it's not a great story. But I'll see if I can just dig up an example here or something that native-run casinos possibly being set up on reserves in Alberta. That's a story we would probably put into the paper in some shape or form, maybe not at length, but perhaps a smaller story.
The routine human interest story, the car crashes last night, that sort of thing tend to appear less in the Globe and Mail. We quite consciously do not focus on any one city. Although our circulation is preponderantly in Ontario, the circulation reaches across the country, and we don't have a city hall reporter in any city. So local issues tend to get shorter shrift in the Globe and Mail.
Anti-poverty demo. Today is International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, United Nations. Demo at LeBreton Flats from 6 till 7. I haven't seen any advertising for it. Yeah, everything's on at the same time. I have seen no ads for it. Lynn Atkinson's group is involved in this. We've dealt with her many times before. at this point, that too would be a drive-by. I just don't have the bodies. Sometimes it simply depends on staffing, whether I have somebody who can go to it. It depends on reporters' availability. It just depends on so many different factors that I can never say to anybody, yes, we're definitely going to be there. And what I always try to tell people is you're going to be one of the things we're going to look at, but we sometimes make the decision about an event that we're going to go to half an hour before the event starts. Sometimes people don't understand that, but news is so fluid and it happens so constantly and continually that so many variables can come into play. It's never really one thing over another. It can be 3 or 4 things. And sometimes it may just be there's no cameraman and I can't go.
Is this? Oh, yeah. Anything at all? Nothing at all. Yeah, I can hear you. What? This is what this is all about. Exactly, that's right. And I'll just I'll say 1 or 2 things and then we'll go to the 2 shot. I don't know. It's okay. Whatever you feel comfortable with. That's great. It is great, eh?
The problem of poverty is the focus of rallies in more than 40 countries today. Participants are observing the United Nations International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Here in Ottawa, supporters are gathering at Le Breton Flats for a rally to take place in half an hour. Newsday's Danny Globerman is there now, standing by to tell us more about it. Danny?
Hi, Nancy. People are just starting to arrive now for this rally, which, as you said, starts in about a half an hour. Joining me now is Lynn Atkinson, one of the organizers. What's the message that you're trying to get out in this, through this day, through this rally?
Well, it's the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And of course, what's happening in our country at the moment and the way we're treating poor people is just absolutely terrible. And so we're taking this opportunity, the International Day named by the UN for the Eradication of Poverty, to kick off the year 1996, which is the International Year for the Eradication of Poverty.
Tonight, one of the things that I think made us go live, or was influential in our going live from here, was the fact that it was happening during our actual newscast, and because of that, it gave us the opportunity to cover something that had immediacy, because it was happening, although it's not quite happening between 6 and 7, it will be, and that was one of the things that I think influenced us. That's not the most important thing, though. The most important thing is the issue itself, and I think the issue of poverty is something that's getting a lot of attention right now.
Given that it happens to be at 6 o'clock, which is a pretty busy time, given that I really don't have a cameraman to go there for the whole time and I'm sort of piggybacking on another story, it'll probably end up being what we call 30 seconds visual voiceover on our late night show.
Nightline with Lee Chappell.
If we go there, and there are 350 people waving placards or whatever, maybe that will change our mind about the story. Or if I'm able to send a reporter there with the cameraman and she finds someone who's willing to share a particularly, heart-rendering story, maybe that will change how much attention we give that story.
75 people gathered at Le Breton Flats in Ottawa tonight to mark International Day for the Eradication of Poverty.
A lot of people without food on the plate.
Many of the people at the rally are among the 1 in 5 Canadians who live in poverty. That rate has jumped some 6% since 1975.
Every news story, to get into the newspaper, one of the criteria is there a photo to illustrate it? I mean, a newspaper needs pictures, to divide the stories up. So if there's some kind of a visual image that you could put to go along with your story. I mean, it may be if something as simple as if a certain ethnic group is having a celebration or is trying to get a certain point across, actually wearing the clothing that is typical of that group might be useful. I mean, it's only for the picture point of view. It just helps get a good image that will give the story a better chance of getting good play in the newspaper. For example, if you've got a photograph that is absolutely beautiful, front page photograph, well, the chances are that the story that goes along with it will either run on the front page, or there'll be a box that says, please turn to such and such to read the story about this picture. So that's very useful if you're trying to get your message across.
It'll quite often give the headline writer something to go off, to come up with a headline that will help the reader into the story, because really that's what the picture is doing. 2 things. It's trying to inform in a way that the words can't, and it's trying to lead the reader into the story. It's another way the reader can say, well, this is something I'm interested in.
Basically, I judge whether a story is well written or not. If a headline comes easily to me, then I feel that the reporter's done a good job, and the essence of the story is easily understandable. If I have to struggle with a headline, then that could be a clue that maybe things could be written in a little clearer manner, or it hasn't really gotten to the guts of the story.
Get new students in hall today.
Okay, 24 high school students from Calgary are visiting with students in Hull. I get from that these are students who live in Hull. You're telling me that there's students
Quebec
that could be
students?
from Newfoundland that happen to be in Hull today?
Okay. Quebec students then?
Students in West Quebec?
Hi, it's Erin.
Yes.
It's Rita.
Okay, that would take
How are you?
Thank you.
Thank you. Threats from Dan Miles.
I have, like, right off the top of the next tape, it's them, like, a whole bunch of them, like 30 kids walking in through the doors and walking down the hall and up the escalator. After that, it's them in different parts of the museum.
Do we have them doing anything unifying?
Afterward, they're sort of looking at different displays together.
The one example of the students from Calgary who are coming to Gatineau, and Canadian, English Canadian and French Canadian kids getting together and perhaps realizing they're not that much different. In our market, that's very important because we sit right on the border between English Canada and Quebec. So that's the kind of story that we believe our audience is interested in. And we make a conscious decision to go after those kind of stories. It happens to coincide with our priority of children. We give young people a chance to tell their story, to give their views.
The students from Alberta are taking a lesson out of the classroom in Hull, Quebec. They're learning about culture and commonality.
What? There was no other embraces, hugs, any kind of thing like that?
Closest thing is the girl pinning the thing on the other girl's shirt.
Yeah, and you couldn't really tell what was going on there.
I'm Anna Karina Tabunyar. Students are getting... I'm Anna Karina Tabunyar.
Okay, so what are we still missing?
Still framing on camera 3 for the first story, please. Goal line 1.
5, 4, 3 to the
sound on.
2, 1. 10, 9, 8,
Stand by 3
7,
still.
6 to max. 5, 4, 3, 2,
Dissolve.
1.
Audio, just a reminder, you have some music for the bridge coming up, loose key.
5 key.
Stand by key.
3, 2, 1.
Key. Goal line 2. Stand by line 2, settle on tape.
3,
Use
2,
lines Anna Karina
1.
Tabunyar.
Take it.
The T.
Alberta students
Sounds
are
like
taking
me.
a lesson out of the classroom. in
Sorry
Western
about that. I
Quebec.
had it still and
They're
didn't
learning
have
about
it. That's why I
culture and
confused you.
commonality.
Key.
I've been speaking more
Tara
English.
Lesock is
I
next.
have trouble in English, so
Stand
I'm
by
learning.
Kara key, please.
These teens say living together has
5
been
to
a
key.
valuable
4,
exercise that adults would probably
2,
flunk.
I don't think it would
1.
have the same extent.
Still
if it
change,
was
please.
older people,
Loose key.
Okay,
because
15.
they're not
OH
as
News is the
open,
NQ.
Coming to 2
become
next.
really good friends with someone.
Well done,
The
Paul.
young emissaries say this exchange has taught them much more than culture
5,
and language.
4,
It's bred
Stand by
friendship.
2.
Anna Karina Tabunyar,
1.
CJOH News, Hull.
Take cue.
Proud of students who are here.
The news media are modern-day storytellers. In selecting stories, the media looks for specific things. Sometimes it's the popularity of a story. Sometimes it's the visual appeal. And other times it looks for a different angle on the same issue. Every day, the media chooses the stories that they believe will best capture your interest. Other programs in the series will help you organize your stories to gain the media attention you seek. For Gaining a Voice, I'm Deborah Carter.